Greetings, my fellow freedom-loving sovereign thinkers. This is LLP's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date, Wednesday, January 16th, 2019. So, let us begin. Good day again, my friends. Early Wednesday morning in the heart of the New River of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Decided to do another show at this time. Nice little cool breeze. Some people assume it's freezing, but I love it. I really do. Good time to relax, chill, take a stroll at night. I think it's great. Yeah, so looks like they passed H.R. Bill 1 pertaining to anti-Semitism. Yes, we have other countries tell us how to live and how to wipe our rear ends. Oh, no such thing as free speech with this bill. I support free speech, but when it comes to anti-Semitism, it's null and void. Shut up. Yeah. Tired of this malarkey. Other people telling us how to think. Like corporations as well. Well, here, free speech is legit. So, do a little browsing here and there and decided to do a couple of topics for this time. And we'll just start off. There'll be two here. We'll start off from Consortium News. Came out yesterday to be exact. It is by Greg Grandin from Tom Dispatch. It's entitled How Not to Build a Great Wall. Trump's promises of an unsurmountable barrier between U.S. and Mexico is an exercise in proven futility, writes Greg Grandin in his guided tour of fortification over several decades. So sit back, enjoy it. So as it reads here, the point was less to actually build the wall than to constantly announce the building of the wall. We started building our wall. I'm so proud of it, Donald Trump tweeted. What a thing of beauty. In fact, no wall, or certainly not the big, fat, beautiful one promised by Trump, is being built. True miles of some kind of barrier, barbed wire, chain link, and steel flat fencing, corrugated panels, and yes, even lengths of what can only be described as concrete walls have gone up along the U.S.-Mexico border, starting at least as far back as the administration of President William Taft early in the last century. Trump has claimed repairs and expansion of these barriers as proof that he is fulfilling his signature campaign promise. Plaques have already been bolted onto upgrades in existing fencing, crediting him with work started and funded by previous administrations. And yet Trump's phantasmagorical wall, whether it ever materializes or not, has become a central artifact in American politics. Think of his promise of more than 1,000-mile-long, 30-foot-high ribbon of concrete and steel running along the southern border of the United States as America's new myth. It is a monument to the final closing of the frontier, a symbol of a nation that used to believe it had escaped history, but now found itself trapped by history. A lot of people who used to believe they were captains of the future, but are now prisoners of the past. From open to closed borders. Prior to World War I, the border established in the late 1840s and early 1850s after the U.S. military invaded Mexico and took a significant part of the country's territory, was relatively unpoliced. As historian May not the guy who he has pointed out, before World War I, the United States had virtually open borders in every sense of the term. The only exception, laws that explicitly excluded Chinese migrants who don't need a passport, said Diggy. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Or her. If you didn't need a visa, there was no such thing as a green card. If you show up at Ellis Island, walked without a limp, have money in your pocket, and pass a very simple IQ test in your own language, you were admitted. A similar openness existed at the border with Mexico. There was no line to indicate the international boundary reported. Motor Age, a magazine devoted to promoting automobile tourism in 1909, the only indication that you had to cross into a new country heading south was the way a well-graded road turned into a rambling cross-country trail full of chuck holes and dust. The next year, the State Department made plans to roll great coils of barbed wire in a straight line over the plain, across the open borderland range where Mexicans and Texans ran their cattle. The hope was to build the finest barbed wire boundary in a line in the history of the world, not though to keep out the people, as the border wasn't yet an obstacle for the Mexican migrant workers who traveled back and forth daily or seasonally to work in homes, factories, and fields in the United States. That barbed wire barrier was meant to quarantine tick-infested longhorn cattle. Both Washington and Mexico City hoped that such a fence would help contain Texas fever, a parasitic disease decimating herds of cattle on both sides of the border and leading to a rapid rise in the cost of beef. As far as I can tell, the first use of the word wall to describe an effort to close the border came with the tumultuous Mexican Revolution. American troops announced the Department of War in March 1911 during past presidency had been sent to form a solid military wall along the Rio Grande. Yes, Donald Trump was not the first to deploy the U.S. Army to the border. 20,000 soldiers, a large percentage of that military at the time, along with thousands of state militia volunteers, were dispatched to stop the movement of arms and men not out of but into Mexico, in an effort to cut off supplies to revolutionary forces. Such a wall would have proved an object lesson to the world, claimed the Department of War. The point to reassure European investors in Mexico that the U.S. had the situation south of the border under control. The Revolution of the Republic to the south must end, was a lesson that the soldiers were dispatched to teach. The revolution, however, raged, and borderland oil companies like Texaco began building their own private border walls to protect their holdings. Then in April 1917, the United States entered World War I. President Woodrow Wilson signed into law a set of sweeping constraints on immigration generally, including literacy tests, entrance taxes, and quota registration restrictions. From that point on, the border sharpened, literally as lengths of barbed wire were stretched ever further on either side of the port of entry custom houses. What follows is a chronology of both the physical fortification of the U.S.-Mexico boundary and the physical investments in such a fortification. A fantasy chased by both Democrats and Republicans for more than half a century, that with enough funds, technology, cement, steel, razor ribbon, barbed wire, and personnel, the border could be sealed. This timeline illustrates how some of the most outward-looking presidents, men, who insisted that the prosperity of the nation was inseparable from the prosperity of the world, also presided over the erection of a deadly run of border barriers, be they called fences or walls that will become separate to separate the United States from Mexico. Here's a chronology. 1945, the first significant physical barrier, a chain-link fence about 5 miles long and 10 feet high, went up along the Mexico border near Calixto, California. Its posts and wire mesh were recycled from California's Crystal City internment camps, which had been used during World War II to hold Japanese Americans. 1968, Richard Nixon's Southern strategy famously played to the resentments of white Southern Democrats who opposed civil rights. As it turned out, though, the president had another Southern strategy in mind as well, a border strategy. As historian Patrick Timmons has written, running for president in 1968, Nixon promised to get tough on illegal drugs from Mexico, the marijuana problem, he called it. Shortly after winning the White House, he launched Operation Intercept, a brief but prophetic military-style, highly theatrical crackdown along the border. That operation created 3 weeks of chaos described by National Security Archive analyst Kate Dole as an unprecedented slowdown on all plane, truck, car, and foot traffic, legitimate or not, flowing from Mexico into the southern United States. That would be a run by two right-wing figures, G. Gordon Liddy and Joe Arpaio. Should be a reminder of the continuities between the Nixon era and the kind of demagoguery that now rules the country. Arpaio would become the racist sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona, who gratuitously imposed humiliating, brutal, and often deadly conditions on his overwhelming Latino prisoners. He would also become an earlier supporter of Donald Trump and would receive the first pardon of Trump's presidency after the judge found him in criminal contempt in a racial profiling case. Liddy, of course, went on to run Nixon's Plumbers, a burglar who famously broke into the Democratic National Committee's headquarters at the Watergate Hotel, precipitating the president's downfall. In his 1996 memoir, Liddy said Operation Innocent primarily wasn't about stopping the flow of pot. Instead, its true purpose was to exercise an international extortion, pure and simple and effective, designed to bend Mexico to our will to force that country to be more cooperative on a range of policies. Can we see lousy foreign policies, right? 1973 to 1977, the United States had just lost a war in Vietnam, largely because it proved impossible to control a border divided into two parts of that country. In fact, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, desperate to keep northern Vietnamese forces from infiltrating South Vietnam, has spent more than $500 million on 200,000 spools of barbed wire and 5 million fence posts intending to build a barrier, dubbed the McNamara Line, running from the South China Sea to Laos. That line failed dismally. The first bulldozed 6-mile strip quickly became overgrown with jungle, while its wooden watchtowers were. But the New York Times reporter promptly burnt down. It was at that war ended that. For the first time, right-wing activists began to call for a wall to be built along the U.S.-Mexico border. Biologist Garrett Hardin, a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, was typical. In Population and Immigration, Compassion or Responsibility, an essay in The Ecologist, he wrote, "We might build a wall, literally." Hardin was an early exponent of what today is called race realism, which holds in a world of limited resources, declining white birth rates, borders must be hardened. During these years, southern border conflicts were especially acute in California, where Ronald Reagan was then governor, as San Diego sprawl began to push against agricultural fields where migrant workers from Mexico toiled. Racist attacks on them increased. Vigilantes drove around the back roads of the greater San Diego area, shooting at Mexicans from the flatbeds of their pickup trucks. Dozen bodies were found in shallow graves. Such an anti-immigrant violence was fueled in part by angry Vietnam veterans who began to carry out what they called Wiener raids to break up migrant camps. Snipers also took aim at Mexicans crossing the border, led by the 27-year-old David Duke. The Ku Klux Klan set up a border watch in 1977 at the San Ysidro point of entry and received significant support from local border patrol agents. Other KKK groups soon set up similar patrols in South Texas, placing leaflets stamped with skulls and crossbones on the doorsteps of Latino residents. Around this time, in the swampy Tijuana estuary, an area that the border vigilantes began calling Little Nam. U.S. border agents reported finding pitfall traps modeled of the punji traps in the Vietnamese had set for the American border. Yeah, so has set for the American soldiers, honey traps. If I'm correct, there's booty traps too. If I'm correct, they had like a lot, like they used a lot of feces as well in those sharp areas. All right, 1979, President Jimmy Carter's administration offered a plan to build a fence along heavily trafficked stretches of the border, but scuttled the idea as the 1980 presidential election approached. 1980 to 84, you don't build a 9-foot fence along the border between two friendly nations. Ronald Reagan said on the presidential campaign swing through Texas in September 1980 by taking a swipe at the Carter administration's plan. He was making play for the state that Latinos vote, 87%, which had gone to Carter 4 years earlier. You document the undocumented workers and let them come in here with a visa. Reagan said, let them stay for whatever length of time they want to stay. And 4 years later, President Reagan shifted gears. Our borders are out of control. He insisted in October 1984, as he ran for re-election, his administration started pushing the idea that a border could indeed be sealed and that the employment of high-tech equipment, infrared scopes, spot planes, night vision goggles, might provide such effective control. New Stuff claimed a Border Patrol official through some of the ground sensors being set out along that border, leftovers from Vietnam. In his second term, Reagan did not get an immigration reform bill passed that helped more than 2 million undocumented residents obtain citizenship. He did get it. So here, in the second term, Reagan did get an immigration reform bill passed that helped more than 2 million undocumented residents obtain citizenship. But his administration looked to appease a growing caucus of nativists in the Republican Party. Also launched Operation Jobs, sending federal agents into workplaces to round up and deport undocumented workers. In 1984, the Border Patrol saw the largest staff increase in its 60-year history. In 1989, in March 1989, a few months before the Berlin Wall fell, the new administration of President George H.W. Bush proposed a building 14-foot wide, 5-foot deep border trench south of San Diego, something like it to a moat, since it would be filled with run-over rainwater. The only thing they haven't tried is mining the area, quipped Robert Martinez, the director of San Diego's American Friends Services Committee. Opponent called it an inverted Berlin Wall, while the White House claimed that the trench would solve both drainage and immigration problems. The idea was shelved. 1992. Richard Nixon's former speechwriter Patrick Buchanan provided an unexpectedly strong challenge to a sitting president for the Republican nomination, calling, among other things, for a wall or a ditch, a Buchanan ditch, as he put it, along the U.S.-Mexico border, and for the Constitution to amend so that migrant children born in the country couldn't claim citizenship. Bush won the nomination, but Buchanan managed to insert a pledge in the Republican platform to build a structure on the border. It proves an embarrassment at the moment, where there was emerging post-Cold War consensus among Republican and Democratic Party leaders that a free trade agreement with Mexico had to be encouraged and the border left open, at least for corporations and capital. Bush campaigned to try to fudge the issue by claiming that the structure didn't necessarily mean a wall, but Buchanan's people promptly shot back. They don't pull lighthouses on the border, his sister and spokesperson Babe Buchanan said. Interesting there. 1993, having passed the North American Free Trade Agreement in Congress, President Bill Clinton immediately started to militarize the border, once again significantly increasing the budget and staff of the Border Patrol and supplying it with ever more technologically advanced equipment, infrared night scopes, thermal imaging devices, motion detectors, in-ground sensors, and software that allow biometric scanning of all apprehended migrants. CM lights went up, shining into Tijuana hundreds of miles of what the Clinton White House refused to call a wall went up as well. We call it a fence, said one government official. Wall has a kind of negative connotation. The objective was too close relatively safe urban border crossings and forced migrants to use more treacherous places in their attempts to reach the United States, either the Creosote flatlands of South Texas or the gulches and the plateaus of the Arizona desert. Trips that used to take days now took weeks on arid sands under a scorching sun. Clinton's Immigration Naturalization Service Commissioner Doris Meisner claimed geography as an ally, meaning that the desert torments would work wonders as a deterrent. The Clinton White House was so eager to put up a set of barriers that barely paid attention to the actual borderline. At one point, got a train coming by here. At one point, mistakenly running a section of the structure into Mexico, prompting a protest from that country's government. Another stretch spanning 15 miles from the Pacific Ocean will be built using Vietnam-era steel helicopter landing pads stood on end. Their edges were so sharp that migrants trying to climb over them often severed their fingers. As one observer noted, the use of the pads raised a chilling possibility that the U.S. might be able to wall off the country with leftover war material. In 2006, the Secure Defense Act, passed by President George W. Bush's administration, with considerable Democratic support, appropriated billions of dollars to pay for drones, a virtual wall, aerostat blimps, radar, helicopters, watchtowers, surveillance balloons, razor ribbon, landfill to block canyons, border berms, adjustable barriers to compensate for shifting dunes, and a lab located at Texas A&M and run a partnership with Boeing to test fence prototypes. The number of border agents doubled yet again, and the length of border fencing quadrupled. Operation Streamline detained, prosecuted, and tied migrants en masse, and then expedited their deportation, mostly using immigration reform law Clinton had signed in 1996. Agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement created after 9/11 seized children off school buses and tracked undocumented residents deep into liberal states, including the exclusive Hamptons on New York's Long Island and in New Bedford, Massachusetts. All told, in his 8 years in office, Bush deported 2 million people at a rate roughly matched by his successor, Barack Obama. 2013. Democrat-controlled Senate passed a bill in June 2013, exchanged for the promise for a one-time amnesty and a long-shot chance at citizenship for some of the millions of undocumented residents in the country, offered more billions of dollars for policing, fencing, and deportations. According to the New York Times, with a winding down in Iraq and Afghanistan, however brief it would prove to be. Defense contractors like Lockheed Martin were betting on a military-style buildup at the border, hoping to supply even more helicopters, hard-seeking cameras, radiation detectors, virtual fences, watchtowers, ships, predator drones, and a military-grade radar. The bill fell in the House, killed by nativists, but the Democratic Party will continue to fund tough-as-nails in the phrase of New York Democratic Senator Charles Schumer. Border security programs that amounted to years of arming up the border in what was then referred as a border surge. Oh, yeah. Very interesting indeed, right? Stuff you learn here, my friends. No one really knows how many people have died trying to get into the United States since Washington began to make the border tough as nails. Most died dehydration, hypothermia. Others drowned in Rio Grande. Since about 1998, the Border Patrol has reported nearly 7,000 deaths, where groups like the Tucson-based Coalition de Derechos Humanos estimated that the remains at least 36,000 immigrants have been recovered. These numbers are, however, undoubtedly just a fraction of the actual toll. June 2015, Donald J. Trump descends an escalator in the Trump Tower to the tune of Neil Young's Rockin' the Free World to announce his presidential campaign and denounce Mexican rapists. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, he tells Americans. I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Show me a 50-foot wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall. Poet Robert Frost once wrote. Borders, not to mention walls, represent domination and exploitation. But they also symbolize the absurdity of political leaders taking the world as it is and trying to make it as they think it ought to be. However much people might curse borders fortification, they also enjoy subverting them, even if the subversion only lasts a moment, as when citizens of Naco, Sonora, and Naco, Arizona, playing an annual volleyball game over the border fence, or when an artist decides to paint the world's longest mural, a border fencing, or when families come together to gossip, tell jokes, pass tamales and sweets between the posts, or when couples get married through the spaces separating the slats. As long as the United States keep coming up with new ways to fortify the border, people will keep coming up with new ways to beat the border, including tunnels, ramps, catapults, and homemade cannons to launch bales of marijuana onto the other side, and GoFundMe campaigns to pay for ladders. As Janet Napolitano, former governor of Arizona and the former Homeland Security Director of Homeland Security, once said, "Show me a 50-foot wall, and I'll show you a 51-foot ladder." Interesting there, because Naco, Arizona, through volleyball games, annual volleyball games there. You have people on both sides with tents, refreshments, and all that. It's pretty damn cool. So there's always some great things, and they got to try to ruin it over this wall. There's going to be a flaw, my friends. And that's what will hype a lot of things up. And I know bad foreign policies made things a lot worse along those areas, including the drug war. I've been saying it for years. And the drug war and that border, drugs and all that, it will be a huge effect on. Get it where it hurts. That's the name of the game. A little interesting about great chronologies, historical events on that border. It's good to know. There's nothing new at all. One thing about border wall, building a wall, once they just prevent people from getting in, and they have it's to discourage people from getting out. So you have to see that as well. That's one thing I always say. Let's be a republic, not an empire. Don't tell other nations how to think and what to do. Let's shred the Monroe Doctrine and let it rest in peace once and for all. That's one of the areas we always got to look at. Always pay attention, my friends. Then, you know what? Time will tell. And of course, we got always look at the Club of Rome also. Well, never a big issue until now. One thing you gotta look at, so very intriguing indeed. I always say. Oh yeah. Sorry about that, friends. I almost did a little yawning there, But it's good to know these things. And what time we got here? Ooh, man, that was pretty damn long. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Do one more here. Call it a night. This came from the New American. I haven't been on this for a good period of time. But you know what? I said, let's check it out. This is entitled Anti-King Resolution Quotes White Supremacist Lincoln. It is by R. Court Kirkwood. Before the House votes on the resolution to condemn white supremacism and nationalism, its members might want to reconsider one of its clauses. The target of the resolution is, of course, the reputed white supremacism of Iowa Representative Steve King, now the target of 2 minutes of hate. King uttered the unutterable. Reconciliation is a pretty good thing when he told the New York Times officially Washington got the vapors. Reconciliation means white supremacy, and because King also used those radioactive words, all of us could be contaminated. Fumigation is in order. The problem is the resolution that implicitly condemns King's quote. A real white supremacist to make the point. That would be Abraham Lincoln, who wanted to deport blacks after emancipation. To Liberia, to be exact. As it says here, the resolution, the anti-King H.R. 41, opens thusly. Whereas on January 10, 2019, Representative Steve King was quoted as asking white nationalists, white supremacists, Western civilization, how did that language become offensive? That quote came from the Times story about King, and despite his clear denunciation of the awful things that he said is to advocate, GOP leaders booted him off 2 committees and denounced him as a virtual air pollutant. Oh, please. You know those treasonous clowns got in there already? And he's a virtual air pollutant. Good grief. Very sensitive. Yeah, but a lot of bigger things are happening here, too. So continue on here. The resolution quotes Ronald Reagan and Martin Luther King Jr. and implicitly connects to Steve King to Dylan Roof, the nut who murdered 9 blacks at a church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2017, and Robert Gregory Bowers, a nut who will stand trial for the murder of 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. As well, the many whereases include this one from Abe Lincoln. Why statement as they were, they knew the tendency of prosperity to breed tyrants, and so they established these great self-evident truths, that when, in the distant future, some man, some faction, some interest should keep up the doctrine that none but rich men, or none but white men, were entitled to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, their posterity might look up again to the Declaration of Independence and take courage to renew the battle which their fathers began, so that truth and justice and mercy and all the humane and Christian values might not be extinguished from the land, so that no man would hereafter dare to limit to circumscribe the great principles on which the Temple of Liberty was built. Lincoln uttered those fine words in Lewiston, Illinois, on August 17, 1858. Something to think about, right? Yeah, to all you Lincoln worshippers out there. Apparently, authors of H.R. 41 didn't bother to look up some of Honest Abe's other sentiments. Lincoln and white supremacy. By today's standards, Lincoln was a white supremacist, not King. The man denounced Lincoln's words. 4 days after he spoke the words in Lewiston that landed in H.R. 41, he offered these gems in Ottawa, Illinois, during his first debate with Stephen Douglas. Anything that argues me this idea of perfect social political equality with the Negro is but a specious and fantastic arrangement of words by which a man can prove a horse chestnut to be a chestnut house. I have no purpose directly or indirectly to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so. I have no inclination to do so. I have no purpose to introduce political and social equality between the white and the black races. There is a physical difference between the two, in which, in my judgment, will probably forever forbid their living together upon the footing of perfect equality, and insomuch as it become a necessity that there must be a difference. Interesting there, too. So here, the black man is entitled to all natural rights and liberty, Declaration of Independence, to right, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Lincoln admit, but he is not my equal. At the fourth debate in Charleston, Illinois, a month later, Lincoln again argued for white superiority. I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about any way of the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I am not, nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be a position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, in favor of having a superior position assigned to the white race. I say upon this occasion, I do not perceive that because the white man is to have a superior position, the Negro should be denied everything. Okay, this is Abraham Lincoln now, right? I do not understand that because I do not want a Negro woman for a slave, I must necessarily want her for a wife. My understanding is that I can just let her alone. Wow. In Peoria, Illinois, in 1854, pondering what to do if slaves were freed, Lincoln firmly stated that we cannot make them equals. Add this to another unpleasant truth as the election of 1864 approached. The historical society that bears his name says Lincoln felt the need to tie the emancipation with colonization to make emancipation more acceptable to conservatives. Colonization became a political tool in dealing with the issues of what to do with the slaves freed during the Civil War. Lincoln actually did send 500 slaves to Haiti, which ended in the death of some, and on June 13, 1863, signed an agreement with British Honduras to send free slaves to Belize. However, the British pulled out an agreement claiming neutrality in the Civil War. This, on the other hand, is what Representative King said after the left attacked. We are all created in God's image, that human life is sacred in all its forms. So, the whole thing of going after Congressman King. All these clowns they gotta start doing their homework before blowing smoke. I can tell you this. I don't really jump the gun on a lot of these news media garbage, but one thing I can say, it's all just over a political sham. That's all it is. In Washington, D.C., they got so many trees as demonons in there anyway, regardless of party. They're talking about virtual air polluted. King is nothing compared to those quacks that are in there. Even some of the people in Congress in Florida, too. I could say some names, but you figure it out. I'm real critical of some of the people who represent my district, supposedly. So, always observe responsibly, folks. Don't fall for the hype and hoopla. So it's good to call it out, call it as you see it. It's a sham, it's a deception. Speak your mind. Okay, don't get caught being kind, because that day is going to be out. That day is going to be done. And that is it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you said something that's interesting, email to check out. Whatever you do, please address your correspondence with decorum. Hit that like button, even on Spreaker. Plus, I will leave all my footnotes for this episode, contacts, social media, email addresses on my Spreaker page as well. Alright, my friends. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance is helping for the soul again, liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading love. And may your guardian spirits be with you.